Welcome back to Hardball. Today, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi spoke emotionally about the relationship between vitriolic language, like we've been talking about, and violence. Let's listen.
I have concerns about some of the language that is being used because I saw this myself in the late 70s in San Francisco. This kind of rhetoric was very frightening, and it created a climate in which violence took place, and so I wish that we would all again curb our enthusiasm in some of the statements that are made, so understanding that some of the people, the ears that it is falling on, are not as balanced as the person making the statement might assume.
Well, I wrote for the San Francisco newspapers for years, and I got to tell you what she's talking about. A lot of us watching know that now. She was talking about the assassinations of Harvey Milk, the supervisor in California, and the mayor, George Moscone. Joining me right now is Mark Podak of the Southern Poverty Law Center, and Gerald Posner, chief investigative reporter for the Daily Beast, a fine organization, and author of the upcoming book, Miami Babylon. Let me ask you, Gerald, first of all, you, sir, you're an expert on the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and you and I share the view as to what happened there. It was a lone assassin, but what is it about the zeitgeist, the atmosphere in the air, in that case very virulently right-wing hatred of Jack Kennedy, that may have sprung or triggered even a left-winger like Oswald to do what he did?
Yeah, you're absolutely right on it. You know, it's interesting because it was that period. It was almost a climate of hatred that was created. And look at the day that Jack Kennedy arrived, Chris, in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963, the day that Oswald kills him. What greets him? You open up the Dallas Morning News, and there's a full-page ad that's black bordered that says, "Welcome, Mr. Kennedy." And in there, a right-wing organization sets forth their charge that Kennedy is really a communist tool. This was being said all around. It happens to run in the full-page ad in the city on the day that he's murdered. There was a climate in which, as Nancy Pelosi said, people who weren't balanced, the Oswalds of the world, were able to act out violently. And I also, you know, you were writing in San Francisco. I lived there in the late 70s. I was going to law school there. There's no question that people like Dan White, the supervisor who killed the mayor, Moscone, and went on to kill the supervisor, Harvey Milk, were sort of pushed in this type of feeling that you could get away with anything because you could denigrate a public official by comparing them, as they are with Obama, to Hitler, to socialism, and to fascism.
Let me get a mark on that. The question here is very serious. So what is it in the atmosphere that allows a person to feel comfortable showing up at a political event carrying a gun, in some cases 2 guns, and letting people know they're armed? What is it in the atmosphere that lets a person bring a sign that compares the President of the United States to an animal or to a Nazi? What is it makes them feel comfortable doing that kind of crap in public? I wonder if it isn't the atmosphere of language that's being used today. Your thoughts, sir. Mark.
I think it is the atmosphere, the language that's being sort of ejected into the atmosphere. I think that, you know, what we're hearing in particular from our quote-unquote leaders, from both political leaders and commentators. I mean, you know, yesterday Rush Limbaugh was on the air talking about an incident in which black kids attacked a white kid on a school bus, an incident the police said was not racially motivated, and saying that what we need are segregated buses, that this is the only way, I suppose, that white people can be protected from black people. I think when we have characters like Limbaugh saying that on the air to millions of Americans, many of whom actually revere the man, you know, it's not surprising that people feel that, you know, the race war is around the corner, and that we're allowed to say these kinds of things.
Well, let's make this connection. Gerald, you and I agree on a lot of things. It seems to me the oddness is the atmospherics. A communist sympathizer like Lee Harvey Oswald, who had become disillusioned with Soviet communism but was infatuated with Castro, kills in the atmosphere of right-wing hatred of a lefty, even though he's a lefty, if you will. What is it that triggers? Is it the sense that the whole atmosphere is, this guy's not legitimate, the guy I'm about to shoot, or the guy I'm about to humiliate with carrying a gun or with a sign or yelling out, you lie? That's sort of license that's given by the atmospherics. Explain.
Absolutely. Chris, you hit the nail on the head. It's a license that allows somebody who's on the edge to cross the edge from thinking about acting out to actually crossing the line and being violent and thinking they can change history with a single bullet. And we've shown time and time again that that's possible. And it's happened again in the assassination of Bobby Kennedy. It happened also with the assassination of Martin Luther King, where there was an element, and there was a racial element as well, of course, with King, in which he was denigrated. He was called a false leader of his own people. He was doing the March on Washington, and somebody like James Earl Ray thought that he could kill him with impunity and go on to live in South Africa or in White Rhodesia and be a hero. And what you said a moment ago about bringing guns to rallies, I'm waiting for somebody in my own party, the Democratic Party, to put a bill up, to stand up against the NRA, to say it's against the law to come within half a mile or a mile of the president at any political rally with an armed weapon. How people can stand out. If we had been in the 1960s and Black Panthers were showing up with rifles as they were carrying around San Francisco at a political rally for Bobby Kennedy or Eugene McCarthy, the police would have whisked them off to jail. But today, for some reason, they're allowed to bring a rifle right to the edge of the political rally, 500 yards away from the president, and do it with impunity. I think we should have a law against it.
Let me ask you, let me ask Mark of the Southern Poverty Law Center. Let me ask you about this thing here of the South. What is it about the cause? We used to hear the phrase the cause for the people who didn't like what happened in the Civil War afterwards. They thought they lost the war they should have won. This attitude about how you got to carry... I heard a guy talking the other day in front of the Lee Mansion about got to keep the battle going. The battle. Showing up at these rallies in Washington against Obama. What is the battle out there that's being fought by the right, especially in the South? What is this? What is this thing out there?
Well, I think in the South it's a very particular form of white nationalism. I mean, you know, there are a great many people down here who truly believe that the war had nothing to do with slavery, the Civil War, you know, that it was about tariffs or the North imposing an industrial system on the South or any number of other things. You know, this is very much alive in the minds of a lot of people down here, including academics in many cases. So, you know, all of this rhetoric, all of these ideas have consequences. I mean, I think it's worth saying overall when we talk about this subject that, you know, hate criminals, people who go out and murder people who don't look like them, are not typically people who think of themselves as criminal thugs. They are very typically people who think that they are acting on the wishes of the community. They are the brave young men standing up to defend their community. So, you know, when you have a Limbaugh or other public figures saying Obama is a racist, he has a hatred for white people, as Glenn Beck said on Fox News the other day, you know, there are some people out there, some small sliver of the population who feel, you know, what the brave young warriors ought to do is go out there and defend the white race, and that may very well mean taking a shot at the president.
Well, I thank you both for joining us on this terrible subject. Gerald, thank you as always, sir. I respect your book. We'll talk about your book when it comes out. And thank you, Mark Podak. By the way, I think that everybody who does these horrible crimes in history does so thinking that somewhere there will be a warmth for him. Somewhere in the country or in the world there will be people who will respect and love him for what he did. That thought is frightening.